Hello and welcome to YTV. I'm Raleigh Cavero.
And I'm Lily Fast. Last night, the Yale men's hockey team stormed to victory. This is the first time in 61 years that the Yale Bulldogs made it to the Frozen Four, and it's their first ever national title. They defeated top-ranked Quinnipiac, and the championship marked the fourth time that this season that the Bulldogs faced Quinnipiac's Bobcats. Congratulations, boys.
Also this weekend, the YCC announced its executive board for the next academic year. President Danny Abraham, Vice President Kyle Tremonti, and Events Director Eli Rivkin automatically won their uncontested races. For contested races, the winners are Andrew Grass for Secretary, Lee Hamilton for Treasurer, and Ben Ackerman for Undergraduate Organizations Committee Chair. Caroline Pringle and Brita Young went inside the electoral process to find out why so many candidates ran unopposed. Brita?
Now that the 2013 YCC elections have been announced, we take a step back to examine why half of the races were uncontested. Does this year's election indicate that the candidates were exceptionally qualified, or that there's a flaw in the YCC electoral system?
I honestly really don't know why my race was uncontested.
I think that is a result of people feeling like that their opinions, or if they were to do anything on the YCC, that it wouldn't result in anything tangible.
The YCC is here to serve students. So is the UOC. And in order for it to best serve students, we need students to be involved.
I definitely don't think it stems from a lack of interest. The dynamics from year to year really vary. It happens to do with the individual players.
Overall, I think the reason that they're uncontested this year is because the three people who ended up running for those uncontested positions had so much backing behind them and so much support for those positions that people didn't think that they needed to. I mean, Danny, Kyle, and Eli already have so much under the belt through YCC.
I know of some other candidates who were considering a run, but they just decided that perhaps, the person who they were up against was very experienced, already very popular.
It would be difficult to really, meet what he's presenting at the moment with a sizable challenge.
According to the candidates, the lack of opposition in the president, vice president, and events director races is a result of the strength of the three contenders. All three have previous YCC experience and said they plan to use that experience to make meaningful changes.
Our immediate primary goal is, first of all, and this is in the general sense what will guide us throughout the entire year, is to make sure that every student on campus has the sense that there's a YCC that's there for them and that is relevant and that can actually do stuff for them.
In terms of events, I think it's pretty standard. I think you're going to see some of the same events like fall show, spring fling, as I've already talked about, but in addition to that, you're going to see newer events that really showcase Yale talent as well.
My platform is also one that seeks to change the nature of student representation at Yale.
We need to work on our PR to make sure that what's known is not just salad reports, but also a lot of other valuable work that reps are very dedicated to doing throughout the year.
The YCC Executive Board won't be the only change in leadership at Yale. The transition from President Levin to Salovey will also affect the way student concerns are addressed on campus.
President Salovey's new presidency will have a huge momentum on sort of empowering the YCC and starting a new type of dialogue between the college student government and the administration.
I see the YCC as being really a platform for student voice and one that advocates for students. I firmly believe that the YCC can do that. It's going to be hard.
We need to really change sort of the place we're at from being a reactive student government to a proactive one. And I really think the new momentum that we'll have with the new administration coming in will help us facilitate that.
Then there's room for students to make change, and I think the YCC can fill that role.
Student Voice will guide the YCC Executive Board as it works to bring change to campus in the upcoming year. Nevertheless, we can't help but wonder why, on a campus of over 5,000 loud voices, only a few have chosen to be heard. This has been Brita Yelm and Caroline Pringle reporting for YTV. Back to you.
Thanks, Brita and Caroline. The new executive board expects to begin working with the current board right away to plan for the next academic year.
Results from a YCC survey about alcohol safety and discipline were released this week. Feedback was mixed and showed a general state of uncertainty towards Yale's policies on alcohol safety. The survey, taken in March, was part of a larger initiative headed by the Dean's Office's Task Force on Alcohol and Other Drugs.
Out of almost 2,000 students, 14% say they had been too afraid of consequences to seek help, and 19% decided not to get help for an intoxicated friend. Dean Gentry said the administration expects students to call for help when their classmates need it, but also expect them to understand that they are responsible for their actions.
Keep an eye out for the YCC's public recommendations to the Yale administration regarding this issue. Those will be coming out later this week. We turn now to a debate that's gripped the campus for the past month. Though the vote on a 100-point grading scale was tabled at last Thursday's faculty meeting, the controversy over grading policy, and particularly grade inflation, is far from resolved. Clinton?
Thanks, Lily. It was over a month ago that the Ad Hoc Committee on Grading in Yale College had proposed a 100-point grading scale. It was designed to curb grade inflation and to better differentiate student performance in class. But when it came out, it sparked outrage among students, 60 of whom took to the streets to protest the measure.
It would cause Yale to be this incredibly competitive, cutthroat place that it really isn't. Fundamentally, it would be ludicrous for the faculty to support a proposal that was opposed by nearly 4 in 5 students.
We should at least be consulted in something that's going to affect all of us. It is a faculty decision, but it impacts the students too.
I just can't imagine listening to students and going forward with this, since the students are overwhelmingly aware of how poisonous a numerical system would be.
Criticism of the faculty proposal has focused on procedural matters and the difficulties of the 100-point scale. The Yale College Council rebuked the committee for failing to consider student opinion, operating through a deeply flawed working process, and failing to address student concerns, leaving the debate on grade inflation far from resolved.
But we've gotten to a situation where we have this huge disconnect between what the label is supposed to mean and how people are hearing the label. And so if I think your work is good but not excellent, the grade that Yale is telling me it should get is a B. So somehow we need to get we need to break these bad habits that have formed or crept up on us over the decades.
Some professors and students contest whether grade inflation really exists at Yale.
It's very rare for me to give a C grade nowadays. But I don't think that that's grade inflation. I think that's a tribute to the job that the admissions people are doing, that we don't have the C students that we used to have. So the students that I see are really good and really trying hard. So the high grades that they get are earned.
Still, most students and professors do believe that there is actual grade inflation.
We're telling them that fully 2/3 of all the work that gets done is excellent. I have to say I don't believe that. It certainly does not comport with my own first-hand experience in terms of the quality of work that gets done in my classroom. And I'm skeptical about whether it's true in other classes on the whole.
Whether or not grade inflation is beneficial continues to be a controversial question. Computer science professor Dana Anglin delivered a statement arguing that grade inflation helped students mature into intrinsically motivated critical thinkers.
Something that's really nice about Yale is you don't see a lot of cutthroat competition that you might see at other top schools.
Of course, competition can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't mean that there has to be a cutthroat atmosphere. If we pretend that everything is great, then you students don't learn how to be better. You guys are so talented, so gifted, so intelligent, that we're really doing you a disservice at pretending that everything you do is excellent.
I think that it would put undue pressure on students coming in from low-income schools where maybe they haven't been adequately prepared. I think it would make the transition that much harder. I think that it would give students less time to focus on extracurriculars and other things that really make Yale this amazing place.
I suspect that things would be better if people spent more time on what I take to be the primary purpose of being at Yale, to master the skills and material that one attains in these classes. So I think if one upshot of dampening grade inflation was to have people spend more time on their classes because they knew they couldn't just sail into an A, that would be good.
Come November, It's still unclear where students and professors will find middle ground on the highly contentious issue of grade inflation. Lily?
Thanks, Clinton. We'll look forward to more announcements from the ad hoc committee as we move closer to the vote in November.
Last week, a lawsuit was filed against New Haven, Yale University, and Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity for the tragic death of Nancy Berry. She died last fall after being struck by a U-Haul truck during the Harvard-Yale tailgate.
Paul Edward represents Berry's estate in the case. He believes that the university should not have allowed large U-Haul trucks within the tailgating area, and that New Haven failed to provide sufficient policing at the event.
Last Wednesday, campaign filings for mayoral candidates indicated how much money each has raised. Ward 10 Alderman Justin Elliker led the race with nearly $56,000 in private funds. This will rise to almost $95,000 with additions from New Haven's public financing program, the Democracy Fund.
Representative Gary Holder Winfield came in second with nearly $8,000, which officially makes the mayoral race a contested election. 2 or more candidates must have raised over $5,500 for the race to be considered contested.
Former Economic Development Administrator Henry Fernandez says that before the filing deadline, his focus had not been on fundraising. So, his current $5 in the bank was simply to open the account. The New Haven Independent reports that candidate Sundiata Kedalutu has raised $225. In Connecticut, 27 arrests of undocumented immigrants followed the nation and campus-wide marches, including 2 from New Haven. In a press release, Immigration Customs Enforcement said that the arrests targeted convicted criminals that threaten public safety and have committed aggravated felonies. Megan Fountain of the immigration advocacy group Unidad Latina en Acción said that of the individuals deported in Connecticut in 2012, half had no criminal record and 1/4 had committed only traffic-related or other nonviolent crimes. Glenn Formica, a New Haven-based immigration attorney, reported a recent increase in calls from potential clients who had been arrested at their homes. However, he said that immigration enforcement is simply following standard procedure. Immigration Customs Enforcement also rebutted charges that it makes indiscriminate raids.
We all know Yale is home to the world's best and brightest, but most of us don't realize that includes one of the world's best African art exhibits. The Yale University Art Gallery houses the largest terracotta figure collection in the world, attracting art historians and students from across the nation. Olivia and Isabel bring us a closer look. Olivia?
Thanks, Raleigh and Lily. Joel and Susanna Gray are lifelong art collectors who value their pieces like members of their family. Recently, however, they decided to relinquish their precious African terracotta figures to Yale for students to enjoy.
It's special, first of all, because it's great art. And it's evolutionary art as well. Secondly, it's the mystery, it's the Da Vinci Code. What happened to these people? How could a civilization that was around for at least 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years, could produce sophisticated and beautiful work such as this?
There's a huge industry in fakes. So I'm always suspicious. And what struck me immediately when I saw the Gray collection was that there are cracks everywhere. And you could see the pieces that had been glued together. I thought, this is an honest collection. What you're looking at here is as it came out of the ground.
However, this collection is more than just artistically significant. It also carries deep historical meaning. Originally compiled by Bayard Rustin, the right-hand man of Martin Luther King, this collection represents the indigenous African people's acceptance of Bayard and the American civil rights movement that he spearheaded.
Bayard Rustin. He had gone to Nigeria in the 50s and 60s, and he made some really good friends, including the man who later became the president of Nigeria, Azikiwe. They would travel together up to the villages, and that's how they collected these things. I wanted to get some corroboration of this, so I called up George Hauser, who was a friend of Bayard's in the 1950s. He said, I sent him a picture of these things. I sent him an article that I wrote, and I said, do you remember ever seeing these things? And he said, yes, I saw them in Bayard Rustin's apartment back in the early 50s. He said, that gave me the idea, it gave me the impression that Bayard really had gotten in with the people there.
In 1987, Bayard died and his collection found its way to Susanna and Joel Gray, who enjoyed living with the collection for many years. But eventually, the Grays decided the collection needed a new home.
It was really Susanna who made the decision.
It wasn't just a one-time decision. We really spent a lot of time thinking about what are we going to do with the collection, where do we want it to go.
The decision to give it was a little note that Fred Lamp put initially on a collection at the Yale Gallery.
And when we met Fred, we found somebody who we really had a tremendous trust in.
I've never had donors who came and lived with their collection even after it comes here. They were interested in really having the collection being used for research and having classes use these pieces. They were really, they didn't want to just unload a collection.
It's an incredible feeling at Yale to see the big deal these are.
Often at night, after working on our projects, that we'd be very tired, we'd sit down in front of the collection and the very judgmental Sokoto would sort of look at you and say, well, what did you do today? And they have this marvelous droopy eyelid and a staring kind of a reaction with you, and you can't not love them. I mean, they're quite amazing.
After nearly 4,000 years in the ground, these incredible pieces are only a few minutes away from the average Yale's morning commute. The exhibit is open during regular Yale University Art Gallery hours, so stop by and check it out. The Faces of History are only a few steps away.
This terracotta exhibit is part of the African Art Exhibit, which is one of the most extensive collections in the nation, displaying about 1,000 wood, metal, and ivory pieces.
We end tonight with our Everybody Has a Story segment. Cody Pomeranz sat down with Natan Sharansky, former Deputy Prime Minister of Israel and current head of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Sharansky is one of the most prominent political dissidents of the former Soviet Union, having served 9 years in the infamous Soviet Gulag prison. He is also a best-selling author and human rights activist. Here are a few highlights from that interview.
Mr. Sharansky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
President Obama just visited Israel recently, a few weeks ago, in late March, and I want to read a quote from his speech. He said, he appealed to Israeli citizens saying, "Put yourself in the Palestinian shoes. Look at the world through their eyes. It is not fair that a Palestinian child cannot grow up in a state of her own and lives with the presence of a foreign army that controls the movements of her parents every single day." End quote. Do you agree with that statement, and what is Israel doing to make a Palestinian state a reality?
Look, first of all, of course I agree with the fact that it is not good for Palestinians that we control their lives. It's not good for Israel that we control their lives. And as I was saying practically from the day I came to Israel, from when I was released from prison, that I'd like Palestinians to have all the rights that I have. I don't want that Palestinians will have an opportunity to destroy me. And in the situation when practically all the leaders who are countries that are around us, and all Palestinian leaders, day and night are preparing their own people to destroy me, I have to be very careful how I am building peace and how I am helping the Palestinians to be masters of their own fate. And unfortunately, as passionate appeal as President Obama has to us, it will have no power, this appeal, if this appeal, as passionate and as strong, will not be to the leaders of Palestinians. It's not the leaders of Israel are the leaders of the free country. So they are interested in peace for their own political success. Unfortunately, the Palestinian leaders are leaders who are trying to keep their own people under the control, who prefer to keep their own people in refugee camps, and to make sure that their hatred towards Israel will be permanent fact, because that's what helps them to control us. So yes, I agree with President Obama that it is not good when Palestinians don't have their own state, but it has to be added that the state can exist only when it doesn't threaten to destroy us.
Now I want to end by shifting to your history, your story, because I think a lot of people watching, especially a lot of people at Yale, would be really interested in hearing about certain things in that background. You talk in your book, for instance, about how you turned to the classics in prison. You were able to read, Cervantes and Homer and Sophocles, and we're at Yale, a liberal arts institution that very much a lot of people value those texts. Why were they important to you? How did they help you get through?
Well, in prison, when you are under threat of death, and KGB secret police explains you that it is your choice, or choose life, what means cooperate with us, what means go on press conference and say publicly that we, Soviet regime, are right and you dissidents are wrong, or it will be death. And you have to explain to yourself why you are not choosing life. And you have to explain to yourself that what they propose is to go back to be Soviet slave, to say things that you don't believe in it, and to belong to the history to which you don't want to belong. You want to belong to the history of free people who are fighting for 1,000 years for their freedom. And when you understand that the aim of your life is not physical survival, but the aim of your life is to remain free and true to your inner freedom, you'll find out that classical heroes or classical literature, these are the people who are giving exactly the same answer to this question, whether it is Antigona, who prefers to demonstrate loyalty to her family, even if it means death, or it is Odyssey, whose curiosity makes him to face the challenges of life and death, or Don Quixote, of course, who everybody thinks that he is ridiculous and he is inappropriate and so on, but in fact his values are the real values of moral person who want to remain moral even under the threat of death, or many other classical heroes. So it was really very important to me during the interrogations, being under the threat of death, to mobilize all these classical heroes to support me. And as if they were telling me, you see, there are things for which it is worth to live and worth to die for. And that was absolutely opposite to the message of KGB, that there are no values in the world for which it is worth to die. So save your life and cooperate with us.
Mikhail Sharansky, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us. This has been this week's segment of Everybody Has a Story, YTV. See you next time.
To watch the full segment, visit the features page on YaleDailyNews.com/YTV.
That's it for tonight. Thank you for watching YTV. We'll see you next Sunday at 5 p.m.